All right, welcome back to Black Behind the Chair, where Blackness meets the beauty industry. I'm T Dizzle.
And I'm M-Pad.
M-Pad, what are you talking about? So it's been a couple of weeks since we spoke. Like I was telling you before we logged on, I appreciate you so much for allowing this space for mental health days. That is so necessary in the real world, and I wish people took more seriously. So just thank you for your grace and flexibility with that. So it has been a couple of weeks, and we're actually going to get to what we're talking about or not talking about behind the chair. But I actually realized as I was logging on today that we are in the 198th day of Israel's war on Gaza. And we always like to kind of just shout out the people there before we get started with the rest of the show.
Absolutely.
What are you thinking over there?
Well, there was just that the 11 children that were killed. And I can't think of like the exact location of where it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But and then to, get on Instagram and see that we just gave like 26.4 billion in Israel aid, and it's like, how is Israel suffering right now?
Yeah. That's wild, because when I saw that figure, I thought that's crazy, because in Israel, they have free healthcare, they have free education, like nobody's being bombed out of their beds. And bitches like us or I can't speak for you, but for me, like I go to the grocery store and I'm like, I have 6 things in my cart. How is it $100? How?
Right.
How?
Literally.
I remember when I could spend in the 90s, $100 would have my cart like overflowing.
Mm-hmm.
Now I cannot cover the bottom of the cart with $100, but we have 26 plus billion to send to Israel to blow up children.
Right.
That's wild.
But also, like, it's how ironic too that we're such a quote unquote pro-life country, and yet here we are, like, just giving money to
not giving a fuck about life.
Yeah, like, not at all.
Like
not
zero
at all.
fucks given about life.
Right.
These are actual real children, not hypothetical ones.
Yeah,
these are actual real children. Yeah,
absolutely. And also, like, homelessness in America, which I forget the exact numbers, but I do know it's a lot is made up of teenagers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, and it's like, oh, so pro-life.
Teenagers, veterans that we care so much about, quote unquote, because it's all about supporting our troops until they come home from war and actually need assistance.
Exactly.
And I know that for a fact. I come from a military family, so.
Well, and I feel like anyone who does come from like a military family, they all have like some horror story of how awful like the VA is and all.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like, yeah, that's so underfunded, and no one cares.
It's just as broke as the rest of the healthcare system, just as broken.
Right.
Know. So
I do know.
Crazy. And speaking of the healthcare system, I know last time, right before we left off, we were talking about, was it like did you have gallbladder surgery, or you're having gallbladder surgery?
No, I had it last June. It will be a year this summer.
Okay. And I can't remember the details, but I just remember asking for your consent to have this discussion at some point online. And so I figure, since we're talking about healthcare, this is actually the perfect segue from sending 26 billion to Israel to now. Tell us about your experience having your gallbladder removed.
Yeah. So last December, so December of 2022, I tested positive for COVID. And to me, like, had, like, I guess, normalish, like, symptoms. I, like, threw up and, like, had, chills for a few days and, just was out of it for a few days. And, but, like, I did get really sick on Christmas. Like, probably the worst I've ever been sick. But after a few days, like, I was fine and, like, I took medicine and all that stuff. And I tested negative, before I went back to work and everything. And so January, I was fine. February, I got sick for like a week and threw up like all day, every day for like a week straight and was really dehydrated and like couldn't keep any food down. So I went to urgent care and I didn't have health insurance. So the urgent care in Missouri, you have to pay $100 just for them to see you. That doesn't even include like, oh, if you need medicine or like if you need an x-ray or like any kind of testing or anything.
And literally, sometimes it's just, we're not equipped to handle you. You need to go to the emergency room.
Right.
$100,
Exactly.
please, and thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm someone like before getting this really sick, I really wasn't someone who did get sick. I would get bronchitis like maybe once or twice a year because I have asthma. And like, yeah, even like with that situation, because I know my body when I have bronchitis, I would like go to urgent care and be like, hey, I have bronchitis. Like, if we could just make this really easy, like, you could just write me a script and we could just make this like super quick.
Mm-hmm.
And they were always like, well, we got to do the testing and we got to check your lungs and like blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, cool. So I'm going to pay.
Lady.
Yeah. And it's like, so now you're going to charge me on top of $100 now, maybe like another between 100 and 200, because now I have to get all this testing done. And then I'm also going to have to pay for like my steroids, which can be without, health insurance, like myself, can be anywhere between like $50 to $100, depending on what you need.
Yeah.
And sometimes I need an inhaler that costs $150.
Yeah,
That's with my sister who works at Walgreens, like discount. I think like if I didn't have her, it would be like $300 or something like that.
Well, I also have asthma, just to interrupt you for a quick moment. I also have asthma, and I actually have a hookup on inhalers.
Good to know.
I mean, I have to pay for them, but it's not much. So let's talk offline about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good to know.
Nothing worse than not being able to breathe. And I know in that St. Louis humidity, it's the freaking worst.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so then you're paying like almost damn near $350 for just like an inhaler and for literally the doctor to be like, yeah, you were right, you have bronchitis. And so fast forward to February of last year, like I said, I got really sick. I went to urgent care and I was like, yeah, I've been throwing up for these past couple days and like I don't know what's going on. I did have like this symptom years ago, like when I still lived with my parents, and when I went to urgent care then, they were like, "Oh, it just sounds like your body got a virus and that was your body's way of getting it out." And that was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's pretty much what they said when I went to urgent care in February, they were like, oh, it sounds like your body got a virus and this is just your way of getting it out. And so they put me on IVs and fluids, and like they tested me, and I tested negative for everything. So they were like, yeah, we don't know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, fluids made me better. So they sent me home, and I would be fine for like a month or 2 months tops. And then like same situation. I was like throwing up for like days at a time and just couldn't keep anything down. And thankfully, like as I guess like low key, awful to say, got used to it. Like I kept myself pretty hydrated, but like couldn't keep any food down. And yeah, would go to urgent care again. And they're like, oh, sounds like your body just got a virus. And this happened like 3 or 4 times before finally in May, my mom was like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. We're going to the emergency room.
Shout out to
And
mom.
yeah, shout out to mom. But like, obviously, I didn't want to go because I know how expensive that emergency room bill is going to be, you know, and I'm already paying like, damn, $300, $400 going to fucking urgent care now. Like, this is going to be triple that. And so, yeah, go to fucking the emergency room after throwing up for 9 days straight, and waiting in that emergency room was like my own personal hell. It was so full and like so backed up, and just like no one was really, and I hate to like, you know, shame healthcare workers because I know it's got to be hard, especially like right now, but like holy shit, dude, that was insane. We probably got there around 10 o'clock at night, and I wasn't seen until almost 7 a.m.
And you
And
know what? It's probably not the workers. The doctors are probably at home fucking sleeping. The
yeah,
doctor's
like
probably not even there. They're just buying time until a fucking doctor shows up. Realistically.
whoever is at fault, like
Yeah.
these complaints are to you.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because, well, and even like there was an older woman there who, I don't know if she fell or got into a car accident, whatever her situation was, but she had like this big gash across her head and like blood everywhere, and like they're just making her wait in the lobby. And you know, we're still living in COVID, and no one's wearing a mask. Me and my
Mhm.
mom were wearing a mask, but like
Mhm.
really not a lot of people in the waiting room are wearing masks. And then yeah, fast forward to 7 a.m. We're finally being seen by a doctor, and I tell him my symptoms, and I'm just like, you know, it's been happening since December, don't know really what's going on. I haven't really been, I don't even know, I guess properly tested for anything. They just keep testing me for viruses. And he was like, okay, well, let's do an ultrasound. And I was like, okay. And so, because of course, everyone's first question was, oh, is there a possibility that you're pregnant? And I was like, no. I was like, if there's a fucking baby on that ultrasound, the world is ending. We're gonna have a lot of more bigger problems than me throwing up if there's a
You are
baby
the
in there.
Virgin Mary.
Yeah, literally. And so yeah, got a ultrasound done, and then went back, and they came in and they were like, yeah, so your gallbladder looks really inflamed. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Oh yeah, keep in mind, I've never broken a bone other than like a pinky toe. and I don't even think that really counts. So, so
Same.
I
No,
was,
same.
yeah, so I was just kind of like, okay, what does an inflamed gallbladder mean? And they were like, so you should probably get that removed. And I was like, oh, you're talking like surgery? And they're like, yeah, because if it's inflamed now, it could like be gathering stones and then it could explode and then you could just be in a lot of pain and like, just telling me all the horrors that could possibly happen. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna be honest. I work in commission and I've already taken 9 days off. So I'm not gonna be getting paid for this time off that I'm taking. Like, how soon are we talking that I need to get this surgery done? And he looked me dead in my eyes and was like, yeah, so like realistically, probably within the next 2 weeks. And I was like, I yeah,
Wow.
I was like,
Wow.
I can, yeah, like taking off for a month.
And let's just pause this for a moment and remind our audience that you are a hairstylist. And
Yes,
for whatever reason, I have my theories. Hairstylist is not a benefit or I'm sorry, health insurance is not a benefit that is widely available to hairstylists, generally
correct,
speaking.
correct.
Okay. And if you're a self-employed hairstylist, then like paid time off is not a thing.
Right,
I think,
right,
yeah.
absolutely.
So not only
And
are we off work for a month, but then you're going to have this bill of thousands of dollars hanging over your head. Yeah.
right,
Wow.
exactly. And for a lot of people who don't know me, I definitely do the like joke to cope situation. And I do say stuff that like, could possibly trigger people or like I've definitely like have scared my mom a few times with words
Yeah.
that I've said out loud.
Yeah.
But I just remember like the one nurse coming in and this could be a little trigger warning for like any of our listeners, but I was she comes in, she's like, yeah, so do you have any health insurance or like I got to go over like this script before I give you the bill for today. And in my head I'm just thinking like, cool, great, I can't wait to hear this. And it was over $3,000. And she was asking like, do you have any thoughts about like self-harm or like blah blah blah, just basic questions. And in my head I was thinking like, not really until you brought in like this fucking until you brought in the bill.
That's
And
fine. So you came with that shit. Now just fucking kill me
yeah,
now, bitch.
right. And you guys want me to also have like a fucking surgery that's
Yeah.
gonna take a 2-week recovery time.
Yeah.
And like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I'm a single like hairstylist
Yeah.
who works her ass off. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's funny because what you just described is literally what they tell us that our health system would be like if we were under socialism. So, like, we might as well try it because it's already the same.
right, literally. Like, how about we try something different before we just start?
Different.
Yeah, I don't know, just the thought.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so yeah, and I going back to like being in the emergency room, and I looked at the doctor and I was like, I'm gonna keep it real with you, doc. I'm not gonna be able to like do this surgery within the next 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
was like, can't like being realistic, how long could I push this surgery off until I can like take the time off properly and like get all my shit figured out?
Yeah.
And he was like, to be honest, I wouldn't go more than a month, because if you're like getting sick as often as you are, and with like COVID still being a threat, he was like, if you get that, you could get sick, or it could get worse and it could explode. And that would be like an even longer process to heal from, and like just going on and on.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And so I was like, well, let's schedule it for a month. And he was like, okay, I'll bring in the woman to come in and schedule it for you. So she comes in and well, sorry. This is like my consultation with the doctor, and he's like telling me about the surgery, what he's going to do, all that stuff. And he was like, do you have any questions for me? And I was like, yeah, I don't have health insurance. So, like, what is this going to look like? And he was like, let me go get Shelly. Shelly's going to come in here and talk to you. I was like, okay. So he went and got Shelly, and she was like, yeah, so when are you wanting to get this scheduled? Blah, blah, blah. So I told her a date, and I was like, I don't have health insurance, so like, what is all this gonna look like? And she tells me it's gonna be like $10,000, I think, and that's without anesthesia.
Oh my God. The fact that there is an option for without anesthesia is crazy. I feel like white women are not offered. This is how much it costs without anesthesia. Bitch, what?
Right, yeah.
What? You think you're going to cut me open and remove organs without anesthesia? Wow.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking, like, are people opting out of that too?
Yeah,
Like,
they're not.
are people just saying like no to this, that we're
No.
asking everyone if they don't want it? Yeah, so she was, we're getting it all scheduled, blah blah blah, and she was like, okay, so today, you'll need to put a deposit down for $1,800 to schedule like your surgery. And I was like, I don't have that.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, unfortunately, we won't be able to schedule your surgery until we get that deposit.
Wow.
And I was
And how
like,
do you go home and sleep at night after telling someone that? Like, they need this life-saving surgery. Like, you're going to die if you don't get this surgery. But you don't have $1,800, so fuck you. Go home and die.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Wow.
Also, this consultation that took me 15 minutes also cost $200.
Wow.
So yeah, so we're looking at $2,000 just to even have the surgery.
To have the conversation.
Yeah, to have the conversation, to have the surgery.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include anesthesia.
This place is a freaking prison.
Literally. So yeah, I'm fortunate enough that like my mom has a decent job and she loves me. So I was able to help a sister out with that.
Yeah.
Also shout out to my grandparents because they helped a little bit too. But yeah, had the surgery, and then, I feel like within 3 months they come and they're like, okay, so like you had the surgery, let's get that payment going. And it's like, what?
Mm-mm, mm-mm,
Yeah,
mm-mm.
and
I've been off
my
work. I told you I asked before we came into this room.
right, right, like,
Yeah.
I do not I don't know what kind of money y'all think I'm making, but I can tell you it's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, it just was so much money.
Yeah.
And it's there are some times where it's like, okay, do you want to pay for your surgery or do you want to pay for groceries so you can like have food to eat?
But the surgery is done, right?
Yeah, the surgery's
Yeah,
done.
so they're just gonna have to chalk that one
Gallbladder
up
is
to the game.
yeah,
Because the bitch gotta
yeah.
eat.
Right, exactly. That's how I feel about like my student loans too.
Hmm.
Like, just go ahead and put me on that forgiveness
Yeah,
list because
because you're not
you're
getting
not
it.
going to get it from me.
You're not getting it. In this economy, no ma'am.
Right. Well, and I tell people all the time, I would literally rather do a year in jail than pay on any of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. And
if
if you were
that
in
could do
jail, your surgery would have been covered. You probably wouldn't have
ex
gotten any anesthesia.
but
Funny,
you
not
know,
funny.
what can you do?
Yeah. Crazy. No, and it's so relatable when you talk about your dark humor. My daughter and I were just laughing. You know, I told you that I told everyone that she's working on getting her license by apprenticeship in the salon. So we work together every day.
Mhm.
And so we were leaving the salon yesterday and we were getting in the car and I don't remember what it was that we were talking about, but it had something to do with like running because there's like, oh, because I couldn't find the keys. I'm like digging for the keys. I can't find the keys. She's like, if a serial killer was after us, we'd be dead. And I'm like, I mean, at this point, you know. And so she's like, well, all I got to do is outrun you. And I'm like, I'm not fucking running. Like, it's not even this life. Like, don't get me wrong. I live my life to the fullest, to the best of my ability, but like, I'm not going to fight that fucking hard. It's not
Mm-mm.
that great.
No,
Like,
right there with you, friend.
I have
Uh,
chronic illness. I got to go to the doctor. I have a
right.
$6,000 prescription bill right now waiting for me that I'm not sure that I'm going to pay because y'all got me fucked up.
Literally, literally. I used to have this guest, and he was a white male in his 50s, very athletic. And I remember one day he came in for his haircut and he was like, oh, guess what I did today? And I was like, what? And he was like, I ran 12 miles. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah, wow. And I was like, even if my life were in danger, I don't think I could run 12 miles.
I
And
know
he was
for a
like,
fact.
yeah, for a fact. For a fact. My
Yeah.
adrenaline is gonna be gone after like a mile.
Yeah.
So
Well, just
I
kill me
I was
now because I'm not
yeah,
ready.
yeah. I was like, no, like you gotta at least try. And I was like, why? Why would I want to live with the trauma of surviving being attacked by a serial killer?
No, thank
In
you.
this economy,
In this
when
economy,
in 5 years, Lifetime is gonna make a fucking movie about it, and I'm gonna be re-traumatized all over.
no,
Fuck
thank you.
no,
No,
fuck
thank you.
no, that's
No, thank you.
crazy.
No, thank you. And actually, this gives me the perfect opportunity while we're talking about the healthcare industry to transition. I know I sent you a text message. I don't know if that was last night or the night before about Max Azzarello, I think is how you pronounce his name. Um, the man who set himself on fire in front of the courthouse. He's self-immolated. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Um, and I saw a stat recently about how like a third or a quarter of all of the self-immolations have been in history have been post 2020, which I found fascinating.
Mm.
But I saw this morning that he passed away. He was actually still alive when they put him on the ambulance, in the ambulance.
Mm.
But I remember sending you, I think I sent you the text where I just thought it was weird because I watched this man set himself on fire. The video was like over 2 minutes long. And then later I saw the video where they put him into an ambulance and he still had hair, which I thought was weird because when you've burned for 2 minutes, like how do you still have hair? And I just thought that was weird, but also like it looked like he was wearing some sort of flame retardant bodysuit because like he even still had skin and all of that. Did you happen to see that? Or
So
what are your
I didn't see it, but I do remember you saying that, and
Yeah.
because I did hear that he passed away,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean that's wild.
Mhm.
Uh, but I guess like I could see if he was wearing like a flame retardant suit, it might have taken like a while for it to creep in, and like maybe that's why he still had some of his hair and some of his skin, and maybe he died more of smoke, um
Inhalation. Mm.
yeah, than he did of like from his burns, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
um but I guess we'll have to wait for like the autopsy. I don't know.
Yeah.
um yeah, I feel like immolation is always like a touchy subject because as someone who comes from like a very like radical viewpoint, personally, I don't know if I could ever do that. And I have like an immense amount of respect in a way for people who get behind a cause and that is how they demonstrate their message.
Yeah.
Um because I don't know how you feel about the topic, when people say that people who commit suicide are like selfish or um
Yeah.
you know will
Yeah.
say like there's better ways and blah blah blah, and
Whatever.
yeah, and in a way, like I understand where, I mean, they're coming from a place of hurt and not understanding,
They're coming
but
from a place of
also,
selfishness themselves, I think.
yeah, exactly, absolutely, absolutely. And like personally, I had a friend who committed suicide, and going through those stages of like, why couldn't she have like reached out, or like why couldn't she have done this or that, and it's just like she thought that was the best option for her,
Yeah.
and like you just have to in a way make peace with that, and
Mhm.
sometimes like you can just you don't have to understand it, but like you just got to live with it, and yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about like
Yeah.
self-immolation too.
Yeah, I feel like a that is really brave. And I think, I don't know if you watched the video, but I actually did watch the video. There was someone filming as it happened. And
I didn't
so,
watch I didn't watch this man's video. I
mhm,
did see Aaron Bushnell's video,
okay. Hmm.
and that was
Okay.
like,
And then there
oh,
was also a woman in Atlanta whose name has never been released and who
yes.
it appears maybe survived because it said she was
Oh,
critically injured, but it never said she died. But her name's
oh,
never been released. So I find that interesting. But I
yeah.
watched this guy. What did I say his name was? Max? No,
Mhm.
Mitch. Mitch. Um, I found it fascinating that he did not make a sound. I just found that fascinating. Like, how are you burning alive
Mm-hmm.
and there's no sound? The only sounds in the video is a lady in the background like losing her shit because she just watched a guy set himself on fire. You know what I
Right.
mean? She'll probably be traumatized
Right.
forever. My feelings on suicide and self-immolation would qualify as suicide is that at the end of the day, it's your life.
Yeah.
And what you choose to do with it is your business.
Mm-hmm.
And, people are like, oh, there's a better way. Well, what's the better way? Like, what is it?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, our
Yeah.
resources for mental health are slim to none. Like, taking time off work for mental health reasons are like frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the very least, it's frowned upon.
Right.
This economy is trash. Like, people can barely afford to pay their rent, let alone eat food. We gotta
Mm-hmm.
pay for daycare so that we can go and bust our asses to barely make enough money to pay the bills. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so if you decided that you have enough, who am I? Who am I? I can't afford to pay your bills. Like, I can't.
Right.
All I can do is be a listening ear. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's crazy, but I can't remember the guy's name in St. Louis. And he ended up being famous after Ferguson. I wish I could remember his name now. He's the guy that was like, he went viral a few years ago because he's like in church and he's like, I'm not gay no more. Um,
Oh, yes.
I cannot think of his name, but he was like internet famous for quite some time. He might still be. I can't remember his name, so I haven't seen a video of his in years, but where one of his favorite things to say is like, who am I to judge? And that's
Yeah.
facts.
Mm-hmm.
That's facts. And I tell people, because I'm in Georgia. I don't know how St. Louis is, but I'm in Georgia, the fucking belt buckle of the Bible Belt. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody's all about their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, which good for them. But I tell them all the time, at the end of the day, when you're in front of the pearly gates trying to get in, Jesus is not going to ask you about my sins. So I need you to worry about
Right.
yourself.
Exactly.
Worry about yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, as someone who like has dealt with like really bad mental health issues and
Mhm.
like also suicidal thoughts, like
Mhm.
there was a day like I had my first panic and anxiety attack at work when I was at Applebee's still.
Mhm.
And if anyone who knows me knows that I'm not really like quote unquote a super emotional person at work. Like I don't cry at work or like, you know what I mean? Um, but this day at Applebee's, like I was literally like hyperventilating, getting sodas, and
Mhm.
I just remember my boss being like, I remember looking at my boss and going, I need to go home. And she was like, yeah, yeah, you do. Cause I was like breathing really hard
Yeah.
and like
Okay.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, just felt really panicked. And I left and I sat out in my car for like a good probably 20 minutes, like trying to like calm myself down and like, be good enough to drive home. And when I got home, it was like probably one of the worst depressions I've ever been in. Um, and at the time, not really knowing what that attack was either because it was my first one. And feel like I've heard a lot of people say like when they've experienced their first panic slash anxiety attack, like it almost does feel like you're dying in a way because you're like
Mm.
gasping for air and just my body was trying to make sense of what was going on and my mind had no idea what was going on
Yeah.
and it was a lot to take in all at
Yeah.
once. And I just remember like going home and literally closing the blinds in my room, shutting the lights off, like not even watching TV, just kind of like sitting on my bed in the dark. And, the dark thoughts crept in, and I just remember thinking, like, I know where my parents, like, keep a gun, and I could see how this could be easy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I could just go in there and, like,
Yeah.
get it all. Um, and I didn't because I'm still here, but it took a lot to, like, really pull myself out
Like a
of that.
ledge. Yeah.
Yeah, and pull
Yeah.
myself out of that darkness.
Yeah.
And so maybe I do come from like a more biased standpoint because I have been in like a deep dark place where that could have been like an easy option for me. And I couldn't imagine, like, had that have happened on like any other day, especially like a really bad day for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
that might have been the outcome for me.
Yeah.
Because your girl was really going through it back then.
Yeah.
Trump was in office, like
Yeah.
Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter was still going on.
Yeah.
Um, it was whew,
Yeah.
a
I
lot.
think I've decided, I think I told you before, I shared with the audience before that I'm turning 50 in September. And so I've been just very self-reflective because I've come to the realization that I've now been alive longer than what I have left to live realistically. And
Mm,
so I've just been feeling very reflective about that. Um, and so I, first of all, can relate to having a panic attack like, and I don't think I realized it was a panic attack until years later. Years
mm-hmm.
later. I didn't
Yeah.
know what happened. I just like had a meltdown that I was actually going to a Cubs game and I was at Wrigley Field in Chicago and I couldn't find a bathroom. Then I had to pee. And something about that moment like triggered me and I ended up in a puddle, not a literal puddle because I didn't pee my pants. I did make it to the bathroom, but I ended up like in a puddle of tears and snot bubbles in the bathroom at Wrigley Field, bawling my eyes out with my husband pacing outside the door because he couldn't come in to check on
Yeah.
me.
Right.
Um, and no, so that's totally relatable. Um, and like I said, at the end of the day, I feel like the decision, I'm really glad that you pulled yourself out of it. And also, for me, there's no judgment for people that just choose not to. And I remember, speaking of my son, or speaking of healthcare and benefits for veterans, my son is a veteran. He's 30 years old. He served 4 years in the Air Force and deployed 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I say all the time that the child, because he was 17 when he left, he graduated high school at 17 and immediately went into the Air Force. The
Mm.
child that I sent away at 17 is not the same person that came back from being deployed those multiple times. And there's been several times where he's called me with very, very dark thoughts. And as a mom, that's horrible. Nobody, wants to hear that
Right.
from their child. I had a point with that, and I just got kind of caught up in those emotions. Yeah, I lost it. I lost it
That's
because I started
okay.
talking about my
That's
baby.
real. That's real. No, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it had something to do with healthcare, with the healthcare system. I'll come back to that. I'll come
Yeah,
back to that.
absolutely.
All right. What are you talking about or not talking about behind the chair this week?
Let me see here. I I've still kind of been not directly being the one to bring up what's really going on. You know, if a guest talks to me about, like, you know, Palestine, I'll mention it, or, you know,
You have
stuff.
guests that are bringing it up.
Well, no, but
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, if they do, I'll like
Mhm.
talk about it with them. But I've been I've been talking, this isn't going to be like anything we've been talking about, so it's
That's
kind of
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, I got really intrigued with the dark forest hypothesis. Have you
I have
heard of
not
this?
heard of this.
So, it is the conjecture that many alien civilizations exist throughout the universe, but they are both silent and hostile, maintaining their undetectability for fear of being destroyed by another hostile, undetected civilization.
I'm
And
intrigued.
yeah, and so I've just been like, because, you know, I feel like aliens is always kind of an interesting topic of discussion, right? You have some people that, like, don't believe them at all. You have some that are kind of in the middle. And then you have some that are like, I see UFOs every Friday, you
Yeah.
know?
Where do you
So,
fall on that?
me personally,
Mhm.
I have seen a UFO. I don't know if it was quote unquote aliens per se, but to me it was an unidentified flying object.
Okay. Where were you? When was this? What
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. So I grew up in Lincoln County, Missouri. That is out basically in the middle of nowhere. Small little country town, Old Monroe, you know, cornfields, all that good stuff. And one night, it was me, two of my friends, and my sister. We were driving home. Well, we were driving, I was dropping one of my friends off, and I was driving, and I just happened to look up in the sky, and it was nighttime, and there were three dots that were like apart from each other, but they were like flying towards each other and forming a triangle. And at first, I'm thinking like, oh, that's like a plane or a helicopter. You know, I'm trying to make logic sense of it. And it gets to a point where I'm like, no, those are getting close. Like they're going to crash.
Mhm.
And so I pull over the car because I'm like telling my friend, well, the people in the car, like, oh my God, we're about to witness like a plane crash or something. Like, look, look. I was like, or that could be UFOs. And my one friend is like terrified of aliens. So she like refused to look up into the sky. She like didn't want to see it. But like my sister was really young at the time, so I don't know if she would actually remember seeing it. But my friend, she looked and I was like, oh my God, like they're going to crash, right? And they just kept getting closer and closer and forming like a triangle. And then as soon as you thought that like you were going to see this explosion or like, you know, some kind of light in the sky, it was almost like they conjoined as one and just shot up into the sky and disappeared.
What?
Yeah. It
What?
was it was crazy. And uh yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Like
Yeah.
that to me was
Yeah.
possible three unidentified flying objects
Yeah.
forming into one.
Yeah.
Um And then I also knew a girl in beauty school who she also grew up in a small, like, country town. And she said her and her friend were going to, like, the little corner gas station. And all of a sudden, these two men dressed in suits, but like bald heads, really tall, like kind of lanky, just walk out of the woods and like come into the store, and they're like looking around like they're shopping, but they don't buy anything. And then the girl that I went to beauty school with said like her and her friends were getting something, and the men were behind them, and they could hear them like communicating, because she was like, they were technically talking, but they weren't saying words. And my the girl I went to school with, I was like, well, what did you hear? And she was like, it almost sounded like gibberish, like they were just like
What?
yeah. And then she said that they were like leaving, and she held the door open for them when they were like walking out, and they just kind of went and then just walked right back into the woods.
What?
Yeah.
What? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally have never had, that I'm aware of, any close encounters with aliens, but I told you I come from a military family, and
Mm-hmm.
one of my military family members worked at Area 51 in Nevada and
Ooh.
refused to talk about it. And wherever they are stationed, they're always stationed in areas where UFOs are a thing. So there's like someplace in New Mexico, someplace in, I don't remember if it's North Dakota or South Dakota, but like every base that they get stationed at is like someplace where there's a high UFO thing happening.
What would be really interesting is if you could find out if all of these bases are near or by nuclear power plants.
I will look into that, and we'll come
Because
back to
there
that.
was a documentary I watched. I think it's called Unacknowledged. It's really good. The main guy in that, he talks about how like throughout history there have been like stories and pictures, signs of UFOs, and how like throughout time UFOs have been and could have been spotted everywhere and anywhere. But as time has like gone on and technology has developed and like war has gone on, more and more UFO sightings are happening near nuclear power plants and like
That's
military bases.
interesting.
And in the documentary, the guy who's like telling you his whole story, he, I believe, is some kind of like scientist or doctor or something, and he spent a lot of his time trying to put signals into space and like get a response, because this can come back to the dark forest hypothesis. And he was saying for years and years that like there was never a response, like we were just signaling like signals and we never heard anything, and then there was a response. And within a matter of like, I'm going to say weeks, he said that the FBI came in and took everything that they had and what they were working on, and just like took it and told them to stop working on whatever it is that they were working on. And he's telling you like all of this story with like his paperwork and like files that he has, all from a folder that he was holding when the FBI raided and they didn't take it from him. So that's how he's like telling the story. And one of the interesting stories he talks about is of Marilyn Monroe and how he thinks she was killed because she knew about the aliens,
Wow.
and how JFK used to take her around military bases, and whenever, because her phone was bugged, they said, and she left messages to the president saying that if he didn't return her phone calls, she was going to go to the public about what she saw about at one of the military bases. And he talks about how he knew, I don't know if he was like close friends with Marilyn, but he hung out in the same circle of friends that she did. Because he was talking about like all the, rich club parties that they would go to and all that stuff, and how he went to one after Marilyn's death, and no one believed that Marilyn died from like an overdose because they all knew her. They were like, she never did those drugs. Like, why all of a sudden would she just like do that?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's like speculation that maybe it was the president that.
Yeah. And you said the documentary is called Unacknowledged?
Yes.
Okay. I am definitely, you are, one thing about Raya or about M-Pad, she is going to give us a great documentary recommendation every time, y'all. Every time
Hell
she
yeah.
recommends a documentary, I go back and watch it, and it's always fire. So, but speaking about, I know we're kind of getting towards the end, and forgive me if we go over a little bit, but you touched on Marilyn Monroe not dying due to an overdose, even though that's been the publicized reason. And I don't think yet, correct me if I'm wrong, have we talked at all about Diddy and all of his allegations of what's going on? Have we talked about that?
So we did talk about like the Cassie lawsuit. And we
So much has
did
happened since then.
yes. We did kind of touch base. I think we talked about how like Justin Bieber, like he used to have custody of him. And just like if Diddy is, well, he is, who they say he is. But does that mean we got to start looking into Usher and other, men that Diddy was associated with? I don't know if you've been seeing it, but 50 Cent has been low-key like hilarious because 50 hates Diddy. And so I don't know if you saw the video, but I hope the Beehive don't come after me. But have you seen the video where it's 50 and he's like, "Oh, Jay-Z's not picking up the phone?" And because he's like trying to get, I guess, a statement from Jay-Z about the whole P. Diddy situation. And it's like, yeah, weren't P. Diddy and Jay-Z like cool?
They were very cool. They were so cool that Diddy recently said, I think it was this year, that he said that very few people are allowed to call him Sean. In fact, there were two people in his life that were allowed to call him Sean, his mom and Jay-Z. So, whatever that means.
Whatever that means, right. And I mean, I tell people too, like, at the end of the day, both Beyonce and Jay-Z, and I hate to say it, Rihanna, they're billionaires. Like, it is a different playing field, and I...
Very difficult. I would even go to say impossible to become a billionaire without being involved in some really shady shit. And you certainly have to be willing to kill, or be okay with someone killing in your name.
Mm-hmm.
I am a huge Rihanna fan, and someone told me that I was in the beehive with a lowercase b because I'm not gonna like stalk you and dox you, and like I don't really care if you like Beyonce, but I like Beyonce kind of
Yeah.
way. But no, I've been going down lots of wormholes, and it's looking like when this is all said and done, certainly Jay-Z, but I've known since the 90s that Jay-Z was not okay. Like, I've known since Jay-Z was sleeping with Foxy Brown that he was not okay when she was like 15. And that was
Right. Well, yeah, and let's not forget, like, he met Beyonce when she was 16.
she was a child. She's been groomed. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So while I will hold her accountable for her bullshit, I'm also aware that when people are groomed and dealing with that behavior, that it may cause you to do things that you would not have done. But like if you're guilty, you should go to prison. I don't care if you're Beyonce, but certainly if you're Jay-Z, there's plenty of proof. Jay-Z's stuff has been out in the open for quite some time, so I feel like he's coming down the pike for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, girl. It's crazy.
It is.
I can't get
It is.
enough though, because something about Puffy and Jay-Z both, while I like the music that they've been attached to, Puffy more so than Jay-Z, they've just always felt really dark to me as human beings. Like I've never really been a fan. No one can ever say they've heard me say that I'm a fan of Puffy or Jay-Z, and it's just because they have like this dark energy, just like R. Kelly had this dark energy, that
Yeah.
they just make, literally looking at them makes me uncomfortable. And I know like probably in real life, right? Like you've had these experiences where you're just, some people just make you uncomfortable and you can't quite put your finger on it.
Yep.
So it's that with these guys, right? Like I'm just uncomfortable. I don't really know why. And so now all of this stuff is coming out and I'm like, well, one thing about my intuition, she's gonna be right, okay?
Mhm. Typically never wrong. Yeah.
I'm always here for listening to your first mind about people, about scenarios, about situations you may find yourself in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, also speaking of billionaire musicians, I don't want to assume, but I assume you're not a big Swiftie fan.
No, ma'am.
Have you? So she just recently dropped a 2 album. I'm also not. I just want to clarify. I am not a Swiftie fan. I can't stand her. To be quite honest. But I thought this was a joke until I had to look it up. So these are song lyrics from one of her new songs. I'm trying to see what the song title is called. Oh, it's called I Hate It Here.
I mean, that's relatable.
Right? These are the lyrics. My friends used to play a game where we would pick a decade. We wish we could live in instead of this. Are you ready?
Okay.
I'd say the 1830s, but without all the racists.
She was trying to cover her ass. Wow.
And so I
She was
want to
really trying to cover her ass.
right. Well, and it's like, babes, did you not like, I don't know, maybe go
Talk to
over
anyone
this
about this?
literally anyone before you just decided to
Yeah.
release this?
Yeah. She was trying to
Because
cover her.
like, Yes. Well, and then, slavery wasn't abolished until 1865. So
She wants to
there's
go
still
30 plus years prior to slavery ending. So how do you think there won't
literally
be any? So instead of saying without the racists, maybe she could have said without the slaves, and it would have felt a little more authentic.
and like also let's keep in mind that the year 1865 really wasn't even the abolishment of slavery, right? It was Juneteenth. Um at, I think 1867. It
Ish.
was
But
it was
let's
like
keep it even really realer than that. That
right.
and that there are still some people who don't know that slavery is over
Right.
to this
Exactly.
day.
Mhm.
To this day. And did you and I
Today.
talk about the movie Antebellum last time I talked to you? Did we talk about that? I was just talking about that with somebody. With Janelle Monáe stars in it. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it because I heard it like didn't get the greatest reviews, so I was like,
Girl, watch this movie. I'm
okay.
not a movie watcher. Watch this movie. And I'm gonna tell you
All right.
what, I don't like watching slave movies.
Uh-huh.
I don't like it and I don't watch them. I
Mhm.
watched it strictly because of Janelle Monáe,
Mhm.
because I'm a fan of her work. I'm a fan of her art. Um, and then my mind was A, fucking blown at the end of this movie, and B, it made me think I would like to talk about this movie with you. Because
Okay.
again, I live in Georgia.
Yeah.
It's not the seat of the Confederacy, but if you ask them, somebody might argue with you about that.
Mhm.
Um, so I would just actually like to have a conversation about that movie.
Okay.
So whatever. Oh, I think was it you that I was talking to and you like texted someone and asked them if they had seen it? No, I think maybe that was a client in my chair. It was. It was a client in my chair, and her client was like, "No, it was terrible." And I was like, "No offense, but are they white?" And they were white. It was a white gay man, and I'm like, "Well, okay,
Mm.
watch the movie." That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I will. There's another movie that I've been meaning to watch that you would probably also find interesting. It's called Alice.
Okay.
And I think it's with Kiki Palmer and Common.
Oh,
And in the trailer, it looks like it's during like slavery time.
okay.
Um, like just how they're dressed, how they're talking and everything. And Kiki Palmer's character like takes off running into the woods. She's escaping. And
Okay.
then all of a sudden, she like runs out and she's on like a paved street. And Common is coming down in like a semi truck.
Girl, I'm about to watch
And
this as soon as we get off this call, okay?
yes, and he almost, he almost hits her, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing out here?" Because she like passes out,
Yeah.
and he's like, "You know, you don't have to like dress like that no more. Like you're not a slave." And
Yeah.
she had no idea because it's really like the 70s,
Yeah.
and she had no idea that
Yeah. There have been
slavery.
people that have found as recently as the late 80s, early 90s who didn't know that slavery was over. So
Yeah,
I don't doubt for one moment that there are still people to this day.
absolutely,
Because there's
absolutely.
places, right? Like one thing about Black people, my husband and I say this as a joke all the time, but it's like funny, but not ha ha funny, right? Like there are
Right.
certain things that Black people are not going to do. Like we need white people to do certain shit because we're
Mhm.
not like adventurous like that. Like we're not going to put our lives on the line. Like if it's dangerous, we're not fucking going. And white
No,
people are here for it. Um,
literally.
and so I live in Georgia, but I'm very clear that I stay in the parts where it's common to see Black people. I don't go in small town backwoods Georgia For any reason, for what reason would I go there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know what's happening in these places, who's there, you know what I mean? We don't know. We don't
Hmm.
know. We have no way of knowing.
Right. Well, and like, I don't know about you, but I've seen plenty of true crime episodes or, unsolved murder mysteries of Black and brown people going through these small fucking towns and never being seen or heard from again.
Yeah.
And if you, I believe someone has done like a map somewhere, um, where some of those people went missing. Like, it's not too far from sundown towns that still
Mm-hmm.
exist, and which is like crazy that a
Mm-hmm.
sundown town can still exist.
And they
um
do.
and they do. Another documentary, I don't know if we've talked about it, but you could add it to your list, is called Welcome to Leaf.
Spell the last word.
I believe it's Leith or Leth.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's about this white supremacist that moves up to, I think, Montana, and he tries to like start essentially like a white supremacist neo-Nazi town
Mm.
in Leaf. And it's just like, it's low-key kind of scary that that could happen, but then it's like wild to fast forward to like January 6th, 2021 and being like, oh wow, like, well, that happened, so I
Mm-hmm.
guess
Mm-hmm.
anything's possible.
Literally anything is possible.
Because I forget when Welcome to Leaf came out. I want to say within the past 10 years. Like,
Yeah.
it was pretty kind of recent. But yeah, that's just like fucking wild. And it's like crazy because he's not the only one that like has that ideology, right? Like, there are other people that are backing him, funding
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
listening to him.
Yeah.
And I guess because we're not piece of shit people, but I could not imagine like dedicating that much time to like hate someone based on skin color.
There are so many other very valid reasons for hating people.
Literally. Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about something the other day because, here in America, we have like, I think the highest rating of like serial killers and like just, I feel like America is the poster child for like toxic men, right?
Mhm.
And I was just thinking, I was like, what kind of world would we live in if instead of like other men bullying other men about like sexuality or like favorite colors or stupid fucking shit like that, instead of like um actually getting onto them for being, a rapist or like an abuser or like actual horrible things,
Yeah.
where would we be in society?
No doubt. No
You
doubt.
know?
No doubt.
Like, imagine, I just think of like, back in the 50s and 60s of like a young boy who discovers that they're gay and they're literally getting the shit beat out of them because of it. And then now instead of just growing up and being like a happy gay man, he's going to have like all these issues and problems and not being able to express himself, which could turn into a violent situation and like could possibly kill himself or others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
We would rather that be the norm
Yeah.
than,
God
oh,
forbid.
yeah, he wanted to hold hands with another boy.
God forbid. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And just to circle back on the sundown town because I spoke about being in Georgia and about there being active sundown towns to this day. I
Mhm.
actually just listened to a true crime podcast recently. And I remember when it happened, but I was listening to it more in depth about Tamla Horsford, who was
Mhm.
killed in 2018 in Cumming, Georgia. Um, and it's crazy because she's the only black woman at this sleepover, and there's like, it looked like maybe 10 women in the photo, but she's the only black woman. Everyone else is white. The husband of the woman whose home they were in, I think, was Latino. Um, but he was white adjacent, right?
Mhm.
And this woman ends up dead, and like the police basically covered it up, and she's died, and no one's ever been arrested. And yeah, there's definitely still places in Georgia where people are like, yeah, don't go there at night
Mhm.
in
You know,
2024.
her case and then Kendrick Johnson's case
Mm-hmm.
are like
Which was the
some of the
young man who was
cases.
found rolled up in a gym mat, and it was
Yep.
ruled an accident. Like,
Mhm.
how do you
Yeah.
die and roll yourself up in a gym mat accidentally? And then, and then the state sued his family.
Mhm.
I don't remember what the lawsuit was about, but they sued his family basically for like money for loss of resources for them investigating his death.
Yeah, it was something crazy like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, there are two cases I'll just be like randomly walking and just like think about like, oh my God.
Mhm.
Like will they ever get justice?
Yeah,
And then I don't know if you know up here, Melissa McKinney's
I
her
remember
son,
her.
yeah, her son was found hung in her backyard
I remember
and
that.
cops ruled it a suicide. And I saw the picture when she first posted it,
Yeah,
and his pants were pulled down.
yeah. I remember that. She actually just found a guy hanging here in Georgia in the last like 4 weeks, and they ruled it a suicide. But also, it
Well,
was.
and I was telling someone, I was like, because I'm sure we're both aware, like, mental health in the Black community is an issue all within itself as well. And I just remember like talking about Melissa McKinney's son, and I was like, look, I'm not saying that like Black people don't,
Commit
self
suicide.
harm or commit suicide.
But we don't do
I'm
it like
gonna I'm gonna
that.
say 9 times out of 10,
We
they're
don't do it
not
like
doing
that.
it that way.
Yeah. We're not
Like,
hanging ourselves.
and they're not hanging themselves with a fucking noose.
Yeah.
Like,
Specifically.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like,
Yeah.
I'm maybe
Yeah.
if it were like bed sheets or something, but
Yeah.
like a noose,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah. And I know there were a lot of inconsistency with her son's story too. I don't remember the details now. Um, but I do remember there were a lot of inconsistencies, and I'm not sure if it was him or another kid where like he was wearing someone else's shoes, and like maybe
Yeah,
like there was just a lot of weird inconsistencies in the
yeah.
story.
Well, and like I said, I saw the picture that she posted on Facebook before it got taken down, because she did post a picture of like what she found. And I could see that he had bruises on his
Hmm.
body.
Hmm.
And the fact that like that was never brought up in the investigation was like weird. And yeah, the fact that his pants were clearly pulled down,
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
what?
And history has shown that for whatever reason, when they hang Black men specifically, that they're obsessed with their genitals for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would cut their genitals off. And I don't doubt that there's somebody right now, probably one of my neighbors, who's got a black man's genitals in a jar in their house right now from when they went to a picnic
Right.
back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it is. It's weird. Like, why are his pants down? Why would you pull
Yeah.
your pants down before you killed yourself?
Right.
That's
Right.
weird.
And I'm sure, as you know too, through your sister, like, he's not the only like Ferguson activist that has been found dead. I
Hmm.
believe we're up to like 6 or 7,
Hmm.
and a
And I know
few of
several of them have been found in burning cars.
yes, I was just about to say, yeah, a lot of them clearly there was like a pattern of them being shot in their
And
car,
then,
and
yeah,
the car set on fire.
yeah.
And I'm just a hairstylist. I'm
Hmm.
just a girl that loves a good true crime every once in a while.
Yeah, right.
Um, that to me, personally speaking, that sounds a little execution style.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
someone that probably has a background in maybe like some military training or something that
Hmm.
did not want to leave any prints behind.
Hmm.
That's just me, though.
Just, I mean,
What do I know?
just saying.
Say.
Just saying, I was as I've been deep diving into all of this stuff with Diddy because like I said, I just being someone who was coming into their adulthood in that era, um I'm really curious about all of the things. And one of the comments said something to the effect of like YouTube bloggers doing more work than the police on this case. And that seems to be the case, period, right? Whether it's Diddy,
Yeah.
whether it's Mike Brown. What is the guy's name? He was so fine too. Um, but I'm pretty sure he was like super misogynist. He was a Ferguson protester and he wore like the really long locks. I don't know. I can see his face so clearly. Um, and he was found in a burning car.
Oh, D seals.
These seals, these seals. And I remember showing up. I was in Ferguson. I was in St. Louis when that happened. And I remember showing up to the scene, and there were, a few handfuls of people. There was maybe 20 people there, and there were still shells on the ground. Like, why are they on the ground and not in evidence? That's weird.
Because they don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't put, because it's like, it's so scary too. Like when you, when you really think about it, because D Seals was a pretty big leader out here in St. Louis. And then I'm spacing on his name, but there's that, it's an iconic photo of him. He's the one actually picking up the tear gas canister and throwing it
Yes.
back at
Yes.
police.
And I don't
He was
remember his name.
he was another man that was found.
Suicide.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
But I believe he was also shot and found dead
Hmm.
in his car with
Hmm.
the car set on fire. He was another pretty big leader out here in St. Louis as well. Danye Jones, who is Melissa McKinney's son, and Melissa is a very big activist out here in St. Louis as well. And it's just like, what the fuck? Like, imagine that happening in DC. Imagine if like there were 6 or 7 white people that were pretty big in the community that just were found executed in their cars and the car set on fire. Like
The amount of
Washington DC,
outrage and news
yeah,
coverage.
like Washington DC would be on fucking lockdown,
Yeah.
and no one finds it suspicious at all
Yeah.
that these young these young black men around the same age. I don't know if like they all had things in common, or even if they all liked each other, or if they just found common peace over like wanting a better life for black people against police brutality.
Yeah.
But like no one finds that weird that three black, all these black men, same age, kind of all have the same aesthetic, right? They all kind of had the long locks and very pro black, like very pro black, and just found executed and in burning cars.
And they're not related, obviously.
Yeah, and they're not related.
Like the incidents are not, one is not related to another, because why would you think that? That's weird.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Like crazy.
Hella crazy. Girl, we have been through it today, okay?
Yeah. We made up for not talking last Sunday.
Absolutely. Do you have our sign off? Do you want to do our sign off?
Yes. 1 second. The movement marches on. Black Behind the Chair isn't just a show, it's a statement. We're M-Pad and
Dizzle,
challenging you to be your authentic, unfiltered self, both in the salon and beyond. Keep shaking the table and breaking the mold. Until next time, power to the curl.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.